All right. Let's see. Meeting with Spencer. And then I gotta redo our. Oh, I'll just do this. That didn't work. Oh, no wonder it's set up from using Twitch. Oh well, I think this will work fine.
Good old OBS.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to be. I don't know if I told you, I'm going to be doing cameras with my podcast. So
Nice.
So I'm gonna like call it the end of a season. So episode 32, I think, or something like that is going to be, or 33 will be like the end of season 1. I'm going to call it, and then season 2 is going to be like a new season. I'm going to do video interviews. I'm going to put them on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts, like for the audio. And gonna do that. I'm gonna be, I guess I'm pretty much just gonna be recording it with OBS and have like I made an overlay.
Nice.
So
Do you have a video editor that you're using? There's probably free ones that will just get easy editing like that done. So
yeah, I have Premiere Elements. I've played around with Sony Vegas a little bit. I've played around with Adobe Premiere a little bit.
Adobe Premiere is what I use.
I like the Adobe Suite better, but it's just a matter of if I want to pay for the creative license or whatever,
Yeah, you don't. I'm using Audition. I'm trying to figure out how to use it because I recently switched over since I was using Premiere so much, and I'm not a huge fan of Audition yet, and I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if I'm gonna like it or if I'm gonna keep it still. But,
Yeah.
What is it? There's this one video editor that's actually supposed to be pretty. It's a free one. Is it Hit Films or something like that? Yeah, Hit Film Express, I think it's called. Hit Film. It's probably more than you need because again, you just need something like put an overlay and then just cut. That's really all you need.
Yeah, that's what I've been using Premiere Elements for.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that one, so.
It's Adobe's like their inexpensive version, like
I see.
I don't know how much it is, but it's like their stripped down version of Adobe Premiere.
Gotcha. So that probably was good enough then, huh?
Yeah, which works pretty well.
Okay.
The Hit Film looks pretty sweet.
Yeah. Someone was telling me that they've been exploring it, but I was like, oh yeah, I've been looking into that, but I never actually downloaded it, so.
Huh. I'll have to check it out.
All right. I've been just using that like little podcast discussion document, and actually today I
pulling it up right now.
Bullets. Not that we really look at it that heavily, but yeah, I'm so sad we missed last week.
Hey, it's the grind.
Yeah, I just keep thinking like, oh, I have so much to talk about. I have so much that I need to like get out of my head.
So what do you have in mind for tonight? Like, did you want to talk about like the ideas thing, stuff we were talking about, or?
We can do that. I think maybe the last 15 minutes we could like kind of have an active brainstorm session and talk that out maybe. Other than that, I think just catching up and seeing what we've been up to, if there's any like big updates or if it's just the grind. And then other than that, I definitely want to talk to you about your decision for your episodes. You said to reduce your episodes, and then I want to talk about this. Do you know who Chase Jarvis is?
Yeah, I've heard of him. Photographer who does creative live. Yep.
I recently listened to one of his old episodes, and there's one point that I really wanted to talk about, which painkillers versus vitamins. Have you heard that analogy? I never heard it. They didn't really break it down, but from the context of what they're talking about, I kind of like figured out what the whole like metaphor is.
Okay.
So I think that would be useful for us to talk about. So there's a few bullet points that I have, but so we'll see if we actually hit all of them. But Yeah. Anything
Cool.
else you want to bring up?
No, just from looking over my messages, sometimes I forget.
Oh, there's that Red Bull thing that you mentioned, right? I didn't look.
Yeah,
I didn't check that out yet. Shoot.
just from like a content perspective, I really like what Red Bull is doing. We can like I can kind of ask you about that and like share what Red Bull is doing from my perspective, and we can kind of talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tried to open it up on my phone and it wouldn't go. Sneakers. And then work
just
had
leather
it
and
blocked.
rubber on your
So I was
feet.
like,
Or
okay,
was
I
created
want this.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm gonna hang out with a skateboard legend,
Oh, nice.
Trying to find.
a real life sneakerhead, and a
That
bunch
was
of
just one
sport.
episode. Yeah, the show is called Social Fabric, which is an ingenious name. Like, they're
I'm a clothing designer.
they're marketers and everything. Like, their team is so good, dude. Like,
I had no idea they made content.
well,
The guys who collect
I'll save it for like if we talk
Okay,
about
sure,
it. But
sure. Yeah, we should talk about it.
in the weird
Because
It's-
I don't know and I'm curious, so.
yeah, I'm really like fixated on what they're doing because I think they're doing a really good job of the content production type stuff.
All right, we ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, I guess I will, since I'm recording, I guess I'll just intro us a little bit. All right.
After you cough.
Yeah, my cough is better, but every now and then. All right. 3, 2. Hey guys, so welcome to, I guess we have a name for this now, the podcast chat room or something.
Podcasters chat room.
That's,
Yeah.
That's what it is. I totally forgot. I blanked out on that right when I said it. So, yeah, if you guys aren't aware, this is the thing that me, Sam, aka JustCasual, and Spencer, who does the Esports narrative, we just talk about just what we're doing as podcasters in the esports, gaming, whatever field we're in or that we're playing with right now. And you guys just gotta see conversations that we're having behind the scenes, and hopefully you find some value added in those conversations. We're not really talking to our audiences right now. We're just talking to each other, and it's been super helpful so far. We missed last week because I was sick, so I'm really excited to kind of catch up on things. So yeah, with that, Spencer, how are things? How are things?
Doing
How
good,
have they
man.
been?
Doing good. Everything has been good. It's like we were talking right before we hit record. It's kind of nice to kind of just brainstorm and talk about ideas and get some stuff out of your head because we've said this before, but you and I like don't have a lot of people to talk about this stuff with. So, to talk about it with your spouse or something like that, they're like, okay, yeah, I have no idea. But like to talk about it with somebody who's in it doing it too is really nice to just flush out some ideas and brainstorm and talk about stuff. So, but my week's been good. Our last 2 weeks have been good. Just cruising along, getting episodes done, still going at a clip of 3 episodes a week. And there's some stuff we'll talk about. I think you want to ask me about as far as episodes go, but it's been productive, solid, keep going strong, and it's been really good.
Nice. Yeah, for me, last 2 weeks have been a lot of like self-reflection. I think I might have talked about that. I'm not sure if I talked about it the last time we spoke or if it's just been like I've been tweeting about it or something, but like giving some time to think about things and like not keeping busy and like just being able to digest or like chew on the things that I've been learning or trying to do has been really helpful. And I can't say I've been doing that super diligently, but I've like taken a little bit of time here and there to just like sit on things, and I think it's been really helping, and it's actually like putting more things into my mind. And better ideas, and I think better direction and stuff. So one thing
I will say though is this last couple weeks I've gotten on this storytelling kick, and I've always obviously by the name of my podcast, the Esports Narrative, I've always had this inkling that I wanted to do something with storytelling, and like I wanted it to be more than just a podcast, so to speak, more than just interviews. I wanted to tell stories and stuff like that. And I got into this kick of storytelling, and I found a book, and it is called, I'm pulling it up now on Audible. It's called The Storyteller's Secret by Carmine Gallo. And it's a really interesting book. I've got an audiobook because I don't read. I have my attention span for reading is like very short. Like I don't know what it is. If it's just the video games or computers, like I'm a huge techie, computers, video games, all that stuff. I just don't have the attention span for reading. So listening, I like better, and on my commute and things like that. Anyways, it's called The Storyteller's Secret by Carmine Gallo, and it's really good. It goes through a lot of different people and what their strengths are in storytelling. Like some people are simplifiers. They like simplify their story. If it doesn't fit on the back of a napkin, it's crap. That was one of the quotes from someone famous that I'm forgetting now. I apologize. But the author goes through these different people and categorizes them as simplifiers or inspirers and things like that. And he kind of tells a story in a way of describing how to tell a story. And he uses these people as examples and what they've done and the stuff that they've created. So it's really good for me to be able to pull out some ideas for my own stuff of what I want to do and kind of the approach that I want to take. So that's been really interesting. Something I picked up just the last couple of weeks I've been reading or listening to.
Okay, so what is share with me one thing that you have taken from the book, whether it's you've actually applied it or you're planning on applying it to what you're doing.
Yeah, so one thing I've done is I've tried to focus more on going more specific. So one of the things that I heard about in this book was that the good communicators, the good storytellers are able to mix there's a line in the book that the author talks about pathos, ethos, and legos. I think are the two phrases, but essentially it's like data, emotion, and I'm forgetting the other thing. But there's like three of these concepts that the author talks about, and he talked about in his section about simplifying. He talked about getting more specific or more granular on a subject. And I've taken that to the extent where I'm going to be focusing on my podcast more specific. In the past, in the first, 20, 25 episodes, it's always been kind of generic about the guest and like their story and things like that. And while I think that's good, I think that each of my guests could have a unique perspective on a more specific topic. So I'm getting more specific on my episodes about and deeper into a subject. Like the one I just did tonight, I recorded, it was more marketing and, like audience specific social engagement type discussions. Whereas it wasn't so much like bigger picture stuff. Gotcha. And yeah, so I'm taking that kind of approach. I'm going to be reducing my episodes and stuff like that coming up. So I'm trying to get more specific so I can pull out some more granular topics and talk about those kind of things more deeper.
Yeah, I think especially yours, that even though esports is a small niche, you still are covering such a wide variety in esports. So I think I was mentioning this to you on Twitter, where I think it was on Twitter. My memory is getting such shambles right now.
No worries.
Where, like, I'm not sure if your model for your podcast is like a lot of people will subscribe to it because they're super interested in all these things and about esports. I think it's for people that like are very interested in esports and behind the scenes of how esports works, and then you just get views or listens or downloads based off of like, oh, I really like that Smash player that you had on the podcast, or like, oh, I really like that organization and he has their CEO on there, or they retweet on their Twitter profile, and that's why you get those downloads, because people are looking for specific subjects. So then when you're able to go super deep and in detail on some of those things, you get away from the general discussion or questions or topics that anyone and everyone would have had roughly the similar answers, or the audience would have heard already from just
Yeah.
interviews, and then
Yeah.
I think you find like you're digging for gold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. It getting more specific is what I've noticed, popular podcasts are doing in popular shows. They're picking out a specific topic that's sometimes controversial, or sometimes it's just the popular thing that's going around. People like to talk about current events, and I was while I didn't want to cover like the news and stuff, I'm getting more okay with covering like current event type stuff that's happening and using that as kind of content for my show. So that allows me to get a little bit more specific about things that are happening,
I
or
see.
specific topics, like the specifics of marketing or starting an esports team. Like what are the unique specifics of starting or launching a team, and like go into depth of specifics of that kind of stuff.
Sure. Cool. So, yeah, you messaged me earlier about what I thought about you reducing your episodes from 3 to 1 or 3 to 2 episodes a week. And I gave you some of my insights. What is the final decision on your part for that? Or have you made a decision yet?
Yeah, I made a decision, so I'm going to drop it down to one episode a week.
Okay.
And my thinking behind that is that one of the major differentiators, or one of the major factors that I'm missing right now, is while I am producing a ton of episodes at a clip that's sustainable right now, I'm doing 3 episodes a week. It's very sustainable for me right now. However, I'm not having enough time to promote each episode the way I would like to, because there's a lot of things that I could do. You could go into you could find Facebook groups. That's one thing that I want to do more, is like find Facebook groups specific to my guests and the topics that they're talking about, like marketing, right? Maybe I find some Facebook groups about marketing, and I say, hey, can you guys share this? Like, this is about marketing and advertising or sponsor, whatever the topic is. Go into that find Facebook groups and do some marketing that way. So there's a lot of like promotional stuff that I want to do more of that I'm not able to do, because when I'm promoting an episode, I just don't have enough time with doing 3 episodes a week. I have to get ready for the next one, create the promos and materials for that one.
Yeah.
So if I have a week, I'm going to have more time, hopefully, I'm thinking, to promote the episode and try and do some of these promotional tactics that I have in my head, and hopefully create, not necessarily, I don't see it necessarily improving the quality of the podcast in general, because it's still going to be me recording and editing and all that stuff. So that'll be the same. But I think 2 things: going into more specific topics and then being able to promote it better will hopefully maybe increase the awareness and the engagement on the content itself, to a point where I'm getting more, growing my audience more, better, or potentially faster than I would at 3 episodes a week.
And I think you could also even, now you have more time to prep too. You can do a little more research, scroll down their Twitter profile a little further than you could before.
Yeah.
Just kind of those things to get those, those golden nuggets that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah. So what about you? Like, is there anything new with you with Lola podcast? I know you're doing the Patreon thing. What's new with you?
Yeah. So, it was really funny, and I'm not sure where every time I come up with a decision, I flip-flop back and forth. So I never make the decision when I feel this, but I was thinking about actually quitting Lola this last week. And part of that was we ran into some technical difficulties, and I was not going to host that episode. And like, it wasn't the fault of anybody's. They couldn't do anything about it, and like, they didn't record. I'm like, wait, you couldn't figure out a solution? And I got kind of like upset. But like, luckily it was like all through text, so I could like curb my anger and like make sure I sound like okay. And like,
text fighting is the worst. It's like passive aggressiveness.
Yeah, so I'm like trying not to like. I'm like, okay, I have at least a second to breathe and like not come off like a dick. And it was interesting, because I'm like, I didn't like that. That's how I reacted.
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
And I'm like, that there's something wrong. There's something wrong there. And I kind of realized that the Lola podcast, because it's not something I just realized. It's something that I've known for a while, and I've been I've been struggling with how to deal with it. But like, I'm trying to push it farther, and everyone else on the cast would love to, but for them it's their hobby. Perfectly fine. That's what they signed up for, right? Mm-hmm. But also because I don't play as much League anymore, I'm a lot more dependent on them when it comes to bringing the knowledge to the game. So gotcha. I'm really dependent on them, and I can only, at least I haven't figured out a way, but I can only bring so much to the episode. Then it's just the soft skills of me just being a better interviewer, better moderator, being funnier, all these these soft skills rather than like the technical knowledge, right? Without just repeating the same things that don't change in the game, just like attitude towards the game and those kind of things. So I feel like there's a ceiling because of everything that I can control myself, and I can't get past that ceiling because I need to rely on other people to step it up when it's not acceptable for me to really like force them or ask them to step it up, right?
Sure.
And I've brought in some other co-hosts that are actually really hungry and thirsty, but that's been like more of a newer thing, so I haven't had that like settle in yet, and I haven't seen what's actually going to come of that. So because of this issue, I'm like fighting with myself. I'm like, I want to push this further, and then I get angry like I can't because of these people, and I'm like, okay, this is like a really bad mindset to be in. I'm like building contempt towards my co-hosts with my buddies, and it's like not good, it's not healthy, and I don't like that that's what it's becoming for me. So I'm just like, how do I fix this? I have to like lay off Alola, make it more casual, and then I'm like, but if I do that, then this is not being as useful for my career as I want it to be, right? It's like, again, it's taking a step back and being like, hey, this is a fun thing to do, and as it is fun, but that's not like my primary goal, right? So I was thinking like I should just drop it and I work on my own stuff where I have like full control of I have more control of like where my ceiling is, and so I was going back and forth about this. But at the same time, one thing that's becoming really interesting to me is community management, and like it's something that I've like been looking into like getting into the gaming industry as a community manager, because I'm like, hey, when I look at job descriptions for community managers, like I'm like, hey, that's what I did with the Lola podcast. So it's like, okay, so I'm gonna be a really good community manager and get those skills, and then when I can apply, like I can check all these off on my resume that I've been doing this for like 5 years. So there's this like give and take and like this tug of war that's going on between just like my ungratefulness and my like dickishness and like what I actually like I know is healthy and I should be, right? It's hard what you are and what you're trying to be and striving for that perfection. So I was at like this huge emotional struggle with Lola and how to deal with that. So I'm kind of like I haven't figured that out completely, but I think we talked about this last episode because we were talking about monetization, right?
Yeah.
And I think we were talking about Gary Vee and how his podcast is really just like his playground where he gets to play, experiment. His podcast doesn't have sponsorships. He's not trying to make money from the podcast because he has VaynerMedia that's his money, And I'm like, okay, so I need my own VaynerMedia. And I'm like, oh, okay, so like these things are starting to click. So that's what I've been actually doing the last like 2 weeks. And I got in contact with two people. One is Travis Gafford, who is probably the biggest independent content creator for League of Legends Esports. He used to be the head of the Yahoo Esports division before they shut down.
Yeah, familiar.
Yeah, so I've tweeted him and like direct messaged him a few times, and actually recently he had something on YouTube, and like one of his top comments were like, why aren't you, like, this should be on a podcast, can you release this on podcast? So I'm like, right after I saw that, I'm like, hey Travis, I saw this new thing, you should make it a podcast if you need help. And he actually got back to me like 5 days later. He's like, oh, I didn't see this. So that's in the works right now.
Nice.
Nothing like, yeah, it's really nice. Nothing crazy. It's not like I'm producing a podcast for him, but I'm trying to like get things set up and hopefully bring value to him. And we'll see what kind of doors open up from there. And then also there's this guy, Luis Daylor. He used to be the coach for Fnatic's League of Legends team, and he is currently working on designing with some engineers an ergonomic keyboard for gamers. And
Nice.
it's a little different where it's really easy to change the key bindings, a lot of adjustability and customization in the keyboard, and it's a lot smaller, and you can angle it. It's in like 2 parts. So I'm like, hey, maybe I should be looking at products and branding those products within the gaming industry and esports industry through podcasts. So I reached out to him, and he seemed interested. So I think I have a meeting set up with him Wednesday morning. So that's really exciting too. And like, it's cool to see these little like steps towards success.
Yeah. It's cool.
Like
It's cool to see you trying different things, right? Like I think that's one of the things that if you're not sure or you're trying to figure out what you want to do, I think that helps, just trying and tasting different things. Like that's what Gary Vee would say is like taste things, try different things, just do something that's getting you in a position where you're trying things that are new, and eventually you'll kind of find your way that way.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is that as a person, I love podcasts because like I can learn so much from them, That's one of the things I love about it. So it's super easy with my personality maybe to just digest as much content as I can, learn as much as I can before I actually do something. And I've been thinking about that. I'm like, Sam, you need to like stop like grinding out more information and learning more. Like you have to do something,
Yeah, it's analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah. I've never heard of that. Yeah. And recently I think I had a wake up call because one of the guests, there's this YouTuber that I knew because I don't remember how I found one of his videos, but I found his videos and I asked him to come on a guest for the Lola podcast to talk about his video. He's a streamer and YouTuber, Exile, and he recently started this league news video, and he even said like kind of inspired by Philip DeFranco. I'm like, that's been on my list of to-dos for the last 6 months. I'm like, I just like don't have time. How am I gonna do this? Like I can't keep up the schedule if I do it. And I'm like, I should have just tried. I should have just like done it. And realistically, I probably didn't have enough time, but it kind of hurts my soul and pride a little bit that like someone did it before me. And there's probably people that did it before him too, but like it hurts a little. And I'm like, okay, Sam, we need to make some action here. We need to stop like thinking and planning. We need to like do something, fail, make it better, and by the 3rd attempt, it'll be perfect or something like that.
That's the common trend. Like I've talked to a lot of people on my podcast. I've talked to a lot of photographers and designers as well. The one thing that they all have in common, and maybe they're right, maybe my perspective is right, and I think you might probably agree with me, is that they're so obsessed with getting things perfect that they fail to produce enough content to get noticed. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to do so many episodes, was that I didn't necessarily care that the audio was just perfectly sounding, or that like it was just perfectly produced, or the sounds were just right, or noises here and there. I didn't care so much that it was perfectly produced. I just wanted to put out content, good content. I wanted to create good content, but it didn't need to be perfect. And I think that's something that I struggle with a lot myself when, and I've matured a little bit over the years in that sense, is that I've always been that type of person that's like analysis paralysis to the T. Like I will study something crazy. I will go incredibly deep into something before I even do it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what have I accomplished? Like, yeah, I read a lot about it, but have I actually done it? That's
so painful.
That's something that I've struggled with myself too. And I can definitely relate. It's like, in order to in order to really have adequacy in something or mastering something, you have to do it. You can't just read and read and read. And that's something I dealt with for a long time. And then I eventually jumped in and started doing it. It's like, once you make that switch, I think it's a mental switch. It's like, okay, I'm going to read a little bit of what I need to like get started, like how to do a podcast, right? You need to know the basics to get started. Okay. I probably need a website. I need to set up Libsyn. I got to do the Apple Connect, and then like, okay, you got all this stuff going, but I just started it. Like I just did it. I didn't care that it wasn't perfect sounding. And that's something I struggle with a lot myself. So I can definitely relate to that.
And it's funny because like for me, it's also like very counterintuitive that I'm that way too. Because I'm a person that needs to.
Well, you're an engineer, it makes sense that you would be that way.
Yeah. But I also like need to do something to learn. I need to like, I'm a person that like, you tell me that stove is hot. Like I don't really understand that it's hot until I burn myself, and that's also a bad thing in my life, but it also like sticks in my head a lot better when I make those kind of mistakes. So like it's weird that I know this is the way I learn. Yeah, I'm gonna sit back and learn, and I there's probably some aspect of fear somewhere in there and like other subconscious things, but like I need it. I know this. I can preach this to people that you need to do, and then I'm like. I go home, I'm like, I'm not going to do this tonight, And I just needed like to hear it the 12th time or the 25th time, and just like the stars needed to align right. And then finally I'm like, all right, I get it. I got to do it, It's tough. It's so weird how tough it is.
Yeah, that's one thing that's been a common narrative in my life the last few years is like, if I have an idea of something, and it's stemmed from when I wanted to start doing stuff in esports. Like if I want to do something, like I have all the opportunity in the world to do it. Like there's the barrier to entry to esports is like zero. Like if you want to be a professional gamer, start playing video games and try and get really good at them and talk to people, meet people. Like you don't need to go through an agent. You don't need to do all these things like professional athletes do. Like it's never been a better time to do stuff in this industry because, and that's good and bad, right? Like that creates a lot of fakers and like people that are trying to take advantage of the system and stuff like that. But it also creates a lot of opportunity for people too.
Yeah, we were having a discussion. Yeah, that's right. You were part of it on Twitter. Was it last week? We were having like a discussion with someone, and they're like, "Oh, I just like no one's giving me the opportunity to I don't want to say names or anything, but no one will give me the opportunity to like show them that I can do." I'm like, "Well, do it. Just like go on YouTube and make content. Like, if I want to, let's say, coach a team, I don't need to have Immortals give me an offer to coach their CS:GO team. No, I can just show them like." This is the last CSGO invitational, and Immortals was here, and if you see, this is what they did, and this was really smart, but they made a mistake here, because they didn't plan accordingly, blah, 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 and this is, like, you can just do that. Or, you can be like, hey, this is my buddy. He was playing. He's pretty high-rated, kind of like mid, somewhere in the middle of the ELO range, and this is what he can be improving in his ranked games or something like that. Like, you can just create the content and do it because you eventually need something under your belt for someone to give you a chance to do things. And the painful thing is you're like, I just realized I woke up and I'm like, I want to get into esports and I want to be a coach. All right, I'm going to work hard to do this and I'm going to apply to all these jobs. And you're like, wait, I need 2 years of experience, 3 years of experience for it. And it's going to suck and it's not going to happen tomorrow because you're going to need to be doing 3, 4, 5 years of like your own hustle and grind to do that. Luckily for me, I had like a 2.5 year head start before I realized I really wanted to do podcasting because I've been doing it as a hobby. So it's like, yay. So now I only have to hustle like that much less time or something, but a lot of people are waking up and be like, I want to do this. And then they don't realize like, okay, this is your journey for the next 2 or 3 years. It's not happening next summer,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a common thing. It's like it's so much more prevalent than, we are even discussing now. It's like there's so many people that don't feel like they have the right to talk about it. It's like okay, but if you don't practice it, you'll never be at that point, right? So you
Yeah.
should just try it anyways and put it out anyway. Like even if you know nothing about, or let's say you're very inexperienced at CS:GO, but you have some knowledge, right? Like you play ranked, you have some knowledge. Put some stuff out there, put some content out there. Maybe someone will notice it and be like, "Hey, that person's enthusiastic," or maybe they'll notice your personality. Maybe you're not the wisest person on the game, but maybe your personality is really funny and just shines through the camera, so to speak. But
Yeah, and I think another thing, like a rule that I've kind of had in the back of my head for like creating content is like, you know what? If you're gonna create it, like don't expect the first one to be big. Don't expect the first one to be perfect. What's gonna happen is you have a prerequisite. You need to make random number 20 videos. And then after the 21st video, then you're going to actually be starting to make like decent content. And then after that, you're going to want to hide it for the next 20 videos because you're going to realize like a year after that, you're going to be like, that stuff sucked. And it wasn't until you got to episode like 50 of your podcast or like 50 of like all your videos on YouTube, you're like, that's when you actually started getting good, So like, I think like I have not entered the game yet until I put out 50 videos. Like, I think if people have that mindset, then they're not scared to just start and jump in because they're like, it doesn't matter what my first videos are because no one's going to see them anyway. I just need to make 50 videos so I'm good enough at making videos by next year.
Yep, it's like if you are a content creator and you do it for like a month or 2 months and you're already debating quitting it, it's like how long do you how short of a time do you expect your content to get noticed? Like it's just not long enough. You, like you said, you have to eat crow for a few years to work up and get mastery at your craft to be able to be put on and get noticed.
Yeah. Cool. So moving to another topic. So there is a podcaster and entrepreneur named Chase Jarvis. I found him not too long ago, maybe March or February. So I've been following him for, half a year maybe. He's a photographer. Like he has a website or a company or something called Creative Live where people come and give lectures and teach about things in the creative industry. And I've been really liking him a lot more recently because I feel like as opposed to Gary Vee, he's like really, really in the creative stuff. And he knows the marketplace very, very well when it comes to detail, while Gary Vee just understands how things work in a macro, and then he can go into the micro stuff. But Chase, I think, has a lot of experience in all the micro and just talking to people. And I think his people like him, so his interviews get really, really good. Gary can be very he can interrupt people and be really intense. While Chase, I think, is very, very more down to earth and not as like high like on coke energy kind of thing that Gary Vee kind of feels like.
He's not a hyper like Gary Vee is.
Yeah. So I've been really enjoying his content a lot, and I've been picking and choosing I think the big thing is I've been picking and choosing what episodes I actually watch of his.
And what's the podcast called?
Chase Jarvis Live or something like that. And then he has a YouTube channel that has like either the same thing or like repurposed content or maybe additional. Hold on, let me find it. The Chase Jarvis Live show. So yeah, because it's creative, there's so many different things. So I've actually been going through his feed and picking and choosing because I think his titles are pretty good at like what the episode's about. So it's been a lot easier to just pick and choose rather than like get burnt out. Like, oh, this episode really didn't mean much to me because this person is an artist. And like, sure, I got like 5 minutes of good inspirational entrepreneurship advice that I've heard 10 times already. And I picked like one about public speaking. And I can't remember I think it's Vanessa something, but It's like this introvert, awkward woman that like applied science to how like social interactions work, and it's really interesting because she proves it that she really knows how to do it from the science point of view because she's actually naturally very bad at it. And it's really, really cool. And one thing they talked about in it was the concept of painkillers versus vitamins. And, you know, vitamins are things that people need. They're good for you, not sexy. No one wants to really take their vitamins. They know they should. They don't, but they're vitamins. Versus painkillers. Right. Painkillers like, I have a problem. I have a pain. My neck hurts. My head hurts. Something. I want something to take care of this right now. Right? Mm-hmm. And they're talking about painkillers versus vitamins when they're talking about selling and marketing and like what people want. Because we have a product that's a vitamin. It's good for you. You know it might be good for you, or maybe you don't know it's good for you, but you don't really want it because it's not sexy, right? It's a vitamin. And how you should be actually turning it and being like, what is your problem? And this is how I solve your problem. So I think she was saying like, she's selling a course to help your subordinates have better work relationships, right? So it's like, so I can sell you this course to improve, you know, the work atmosphere and make people like each other more. It's like, okay, that's all right. Versus like the painkillers, like, hey, I can get you this program so that all your subordinates will like you with and feel like they really know who you are in one day. It's like, oh, that sounds really enticing. You know, it's dealing with a pain that you have, and it's really getting to the core of it while you're still like providing the vitamin that they need. And I've been thinking about this concept and like how I'm supposed to like market, because I've been doing more pitches a little bit and like trying to grab attention really, really quickly. I mean, just in the content creation, not just like trying to find freelance work from people to make podcasts for them, but like, you know, Gary Vee and a lot of other people put like 30-second clips at the beginning of their content. That's like, you know, that hook, right?
Right.
And I'm like, so how do I apply this to just even my podcast episodes? I'm like, I need to put a hook at the beginning and stop like playing a 60-second music intro that like people probably don't really care about, and like title my episodes like, if you feel like your teammates always feeding in your games, this is how you deal with your teammates in 6 steps or something like that. And yet trying to stay away from like the BuzzFeed articles that like 10 things you never knew about your solo queue game. Like trying to avoid that kind of fluff, but like really finding this is your issue and I have a solution for it, right? So with my podcast episodes and also like pitching to other people. And it's been something that I've been like, it's something that I listened to on my car ride back from Minneapolis this past weekend. So it's very, very fresh in my mind. I'm trying to like figure out like, how to dig into that.
That's interesting. Like, I'm trying to think it through it now. It's like when you produce a podcast, does it make sense to put some sort of catchy clip, like right at the beginning, like right as they play your podcast, let's say, you put like some clip of like the episode, right? Some like funny clip or inspirational clip or, you know, educational clip or some utilitarian content, like 10, 20 seconds or whatever it is, 5 seconds. Maybe you put that right at the very beginning. Like that's the first thing that they hear is that right into this clip. And then you have like a little sound bite that goes into your intro and then your episode starts kind of thing. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah. And like, you know, Gary Vee, for the Ask Gary Vee show, he does that really well. If you watch him record the live videos, he totally goes through the episode, and then at the end of it, he like pauses for like 5 seconds, and then he records his intro. He'd be like, today on the Ask Gary show, we have this amazing artist where we talk about how to sell your artwork for 5 times more than you actually are trying to. Like he like, from that interview, he's like, I know the hook, and then he records it. And I'm like, I need to do that. And then also with like my podcast, especially, sometimes we do listener questions. There's like 5 different topics that are completely unrelated. I'm like, I need to split those up in like episode 160 part A, part B, part C, or just episode 160. Just all of them are just 160 and just split it up into 5 like 15-minute clips. Like I think that makes more sense. I think people like can skip them if they just don't care and they don't get bored halfway through my episode and just not listen to the rest of it. Like I think that's a smart way to do my podcast that can be very topical and that have multiple topics in an episode.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and it's something I might test with myself. Is I don't see a lot of people doing that. Like what you said in the beginning was like that. Take that like 5-10 second clip or something and put it right as somebody presses play. Like you just immediately start playing it, and then you play your intro, and then you go into the episode. I think that would be kind of an interesting experiment to get people, like you said, hooked on the episode of like the content that would be contained in that.
Yeah, I think everyone's like, you have to have one episode that's 45 minutes long, and it has to go through these questions to introduce the person. Then you get a little deeper. Then you go like you have your spicy question, like 1 or 2 questions, and then you have a few soft questions, and you like talk about these and kind of ease out. Like, why do you have to stick to this structure? You don't have to stick to that structure. And if anything, in creative, you learn why there's a structure, and then you break it. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's what creative's all about. So.
I think that's how you hack culture too. There's a number of people that have talked about this, not just Gary Vee, but that's the one that comes to mind. Is he talks a lot about hacking culture, and in something recently I listened to what he said on a podcast, I think it was that the way you hack culture is by doing things that people aren't doing. Yeah. So one thing, like you mentioned, is like everyone has the same format. Like they've got 40 to 50-minute episodes. They have the intro in the beginning, and then the guest, tells their story and stuff like that. So what you said is, now that I'm thinking through it, makes sense, because you could change it up and be different, and that might be a tactic for you to get noticed more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And SEO and all those other like strategic things. Like I think it kind of falls into those too, even though I like don't care so much about it. It's still important. I think it kind of just like inherently checks a few boxes that like, hey, all right, that's a few extra brownie points or whatever,
Yeah.
But then, I want to talk a little bit. Like, I've been having like, I'm interested for you especially too, because you're interviewing people, and some of these people, especially maybe like, for example, like collegiate scene guests. They're not a big brand. They're not a CEO that have been building 10 years of their businesses and in the industry or whatever, that have, 200 followers on Twitter, and they're not like hitting social media hard because this is not like their entrepreneur dream or anything like that. It's hard to find information on people sometimes. And what I've been having trouble with, like when I'm trying to find people to connect or network with, or kind of strategically like find out more about and like talk to and like engage with, it's been hard to find out information like what is their pain that they need the painkiller for. Or for you it'd be like, what is the juicy stories, what are the stories that haven't been told, what can I get out of you when you have their last tweet was in June, like right, they don't have a personal brand. How have you tried to go about those kind of barriers?
So I've been taking the approach of like looking at what they're currently doing. So for example, I've had some streamers on who you could say are in that category, right? Like they're active, let's say, but they're not big brands like Hungrybox or XYZ streamer, Dr. Disrespect or Summit. They're not huge streamers yet, I'll say, but they still are active in their community. That they still have a number of followers. They have fans. Maybe they're affiliates on Twitch, which means they have an audience. They don't have a huge audience, but they have some audience, which means that there are people that enjoy engaging with them or interacting with them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So what I look for is just somebody who has an active community and somebody that could share their perspective on their grind. Like I had a guy from STDX, Set to Destroy X. I had a Call of Duty streamer on whose episode hasn't been released yet. would be really soon. But I had him on, and he, he's not amassed a huge following. He's an affiliate on Twitch, but he plays Call of Duty, and he plays with his friends and stuff like that. And he's a streamer for STDX. He's got an active, funny community. That's his thing. And we talked about the grind of, streaming and how the grind of, trying to make it a partner is and stuff like that. So I think you can take away a story from anything. You just have to, I think you have to find what it is unique to that person, right? Like,
Yeah.
I am of the belief that everyone has a story. You just have to dig a little bit to find it. And even an affiliate on Twitch who's got like 500 followers on Twitter, if they've got an active community and they didn't buy the followers, then they have a story. If they're active and they're doing things, that's a story. And I think it's something that's worth being told, is like the struggle, because there's Summit, there's Dr. Disrespect, there's Shroud, there's a handful of really huge streamers.
Yeah.
But for every huge streamer, there's probably 1,000 small struggling artists. You know what I mean? It's Twitch streamers are the new struggling artist. And I think I think some stories are more compelling than others, but I think at the end of the day, like, everyone can share some sort of interesting perspective, and that's kind of what I look for.
Sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's something that, I'm still processing it. I need to spend some more time and figuring things. And I think a lot of it's going to be practice, As I talk to more people, I think I'll get better at figuring out, like, what's the problem that they need solved. Whether it's an audience for a podcast episode or whether it's, like, a future client. What is the problem that they're trying to get solved, and how do I fit into there, and how do I stay unique in that, It's gonna take time and practice, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's why I wanted to go more granular with my episodes and go into more of a specific topic, was for that reason. It's like, talking to the streamer, while it was fun and I super enjoyed it, it wasn't something that, appeals to people that are looking for something specific. Like, if you're a team owner, right, and you are maybe curious on, how do I decide if a game is worth continued investment or not? Like, that's a real issue that team owners they're faced with. Like, maybe they have a Call of Duty roster and a Gears of War roster, and they can only have one. How do they decide?
Yeah.
Based on pure popularity alone, or like, how do you make those decisions? So those are some of the things that I think you can really hone in on. Like, for me, from what I'm thinking about, what I'm doing is, like, from that perspective, you can really hone in on specific things and be like, well, what's the personal brand of your teams like? Like, what are their personalities like? Are they cool? Are they, kind of, douchey? Are they, asking for $1,000 a month and they, like, place 42nd in tournaments? Like, what is it like? And there's so many different variables. And I think that's something, it's not unique just to esports, but it's unique to talking to people, right? It's unique to interviewing, is you can go into depth into certain topics. And I think that going more in depth, so going deep, not wide, I think is where the opportunity is as far as interviewing goes.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I remember I replied to a tweet of yours for the, was it Alex and, it was two guys in the collegiate.
Oh, Adam and Peter?
Adam and Peter, yeah, not Alex. And I was listening to him like, oh, this is the part where he's supposed to go, like, Spencer should go deep into, like, how do you create this esports orgs in your university? I'm like, oh, he didn't do it. I'm like, oh, I want to know about this. Like, how do you do it? Because it's actually something that's been on the back of my mind, because I'm like, I live in Madison, and UW-Madison is right here, and that's, like, my alma mater. And I'm like, I don't see them playing. Like, I don't know if they have an esports scene for League of Legends. And, like, are they doing anything? And I even messaged the group, and they're like, I'm like, oh, can I send you a DM? And like, yeah, sure, we'll talk about it. And then, like, they never respond. I'm like, well, this sucks. And I've messaged their president, like, before, like, years back too, like, just out of curiosity, and, like, had some conversation. They weren't doing much, and I'm like, so I've been thinking, like, what does it take to actually do it. What's going on? And I've heard people talk about the macro, like collegiate esports in general, but not like the nitty gritty. And like, if I want to create an esports club and I'm a sophomore, like, what do I need to do in my college? And I'm like, oh, that could have been somewhere where he went really granular. And I think that could have been like a super, super good topic. And I'm glad that you guys are probably going to cover that when you guys talk again, right? I think that's what you guys said.
Yeah, I haven't reached out to him yet, but I think that's something that will be super valuable for people to hear, is like how they did it and what are some of the things that they did to pitch it. And because like Peter, he went to RIT and they already had a like a gaming club, an esports club.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably the case for a lot of places, particularly like the tech schools, at least, is like they probably already have gaming clubs. So what is the value add of an esports club on top of the gaming club? Like, are you going to join the gaming club? Or are you going to be separate? So yeah, I think that would be something that would be really good to cover.
Yeah, how do you sell it to your dean who like hates Tetris?
Yeah, and
that's like what the gaming is to them.
Yeah, and like what Adam said is like if you show them it, to me it's a story. Again, I go back to this book I'm reading. When you're giving a presentation or when you're pitching someone, data is like, what do they say? He did some study and he found like data. He analyzed a speech or something the author did, and he said that data was about like 20% or 30% or something like that, whereas story and empathy and emotion was like 70% of the pitch. So what you do is you start off with an emotional connect. You need a relationship with the person, right? So if you're in a pitch or if you're in a sales meeting, you start with that relationship, that connection building.
Yeah.
And then you can give them some facts to put it in perspective to show that there's real data or science behind your argument or whatever you're pitching.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same kind of way. Like you have to show from like a esports association standpoint, you have to show that there's an emotional connection there, that kids coming up into college are playing a lot of video games. Like that's what they like to do. And if they can go to school and do that, and if their school offers a program where they can play video games and learn, like that's pretty cool from like an emotional like storytelling standpoint. And then here's the data. This is how big esports is. Like these are the brands that are in it. Like this is the exposure your organization could get, that kind of thing. And I think that's an interesting perspective to share with people who are in the decision-making process.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Oh, yeah, I like that episode, and I like that episode.
Yeah, it was really good. They shared some insights, but we'll definitely have to go more in depth of just like how to start a collegiate esports association or something like that.
Sure. All right. Should we do our little brainstorm session that we wanted to do for like the last 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so I recently contacted Spencer about maybe collaboration is really important, and surrounding yourself with like-minded people or people that will challenge you or people that are kind of doing similar things or whatever, like people that will help you grow is important. I'm like, who is that? I'm like, hey, this new guy is making a podcast, Spencer. He reached out to me. I'm like, whoa, he knows Gary Vee stuff, so we kind of speak the same language. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. And you actually came up to me like, hey, let's collab. And I'm like, I don't know how we can, but this is really cool. And I hope you keep doing things. And I'm like, okay, when is he going to stop? Is it going to end at episode 10? Is he going to keep going? What's going on? I'm like, okay, Spencer's a real deal. I'm really enjoying this. And I've been thinking about it. I'm like, how do we collab, And I think we came up with like, let's just talk about some like general esports stories. And I think after listening to one of your episodes, it kind of just clicked where it's like, let's just talk about like, you asked me a question. What's the most epic thing or most memorable thing in like esports that you can remember or something like that? And I talked about this, a huge play in League of Legends with Xpeke backdooring and finishing the game practically by himself, and it was amazing. Everyone freaking out, and you ask these people and like they say like the Street Fighter thing. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I bet it. I mean, you can tell the passion in people about it. I'm like, yeah, that's something that we can do. I think we both can, like, we want to storytell. I want to exercise that, you obviously want to exercise that even more than you are right now too. And I thought like that's potentially a good idea. So we're gonna kind of brainstorm about that and figure out how we want to do this, and I guess try to work out the kinks right now.
Yeah, there's a couple media companies that are doing stuff similar to that. Like you mentioned, the Score is doing some stuff like that. A couple of the orgs like Liquid, they're doing like storytelling content around their players and teams and stuff like that. But I think there's still clearly some room to be able to produce like storytelling content around that. And one thing that I thought of was like everyone is telling, from what I've seen, everyone is telling like the winner story, right? So what about telling the losers, like second place or third place, or that gut-wrenching story of grinding hours and hours and hours and putting blood, sweat, and tears into it only to get to the finals and just be swept, or just to lose in general. And what that sacrifice is like. And I think, and I mentioned this to you before, I don't think it's necessarily the winning or the losing that's drawing people into these stories and why they're so popular. I think it's the story in itself. It's the climb, the journey, the struggle, and the triumph, and then the failure. I think that storytelling piece is where we could find some opportunity to pick something out that hasn't been told before, or just find a unique angle at it.
Yeah. Huh.
And one thing that kind of sparked my interest recently was the Red Bull content that I sent you. I forget the name of the Social Fabric or something like that. It's called.
Mm-hmm.
Red Bull. I'm a super big fan of Red Bull and what they do for their content creation. So they have an energy drink, like that's their company, but they, at their core, like if you ask them, they would probably say they're not an energy drink company. They're like an extreme sports enthusiast or something like that. Like that's their ethos, is they're extreme sports enthusiasts. Like that's all they do: skateboarding, biking, snowboarding, mountain biking, and then you throw into that esports. They do content really well, I think, and they do branding really well. They've branded themselves really well, and a lot of their stuff is storytelling content. Like they do, I don't know if you've ever seen the funny stuff they do, like with the what's it called? I forget the name of it, but they do this every so often. They like have contests where people put together planes and then they like launch them off of a cliff into a lake.
Yep.
Like it's hilarious. And then they have races all the time. They have like these downhill like boxcar races, and people make these funny boxcars.
Yeah,
like they do so much cool stuff.
I had no idea about like 90% of this stuff.
Like that, when I think about media company, like that would be awesome to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that has nothing to do, like they're not in the middle of that. They're not like saying, hey, buy a Red Bull. They're just strictly creating that content. Like they're just creating these events and these contests and all this stuff. And it's just the little Red Bull logo, like right on the side. Like it's just a little bit of brand awareness. Yeah. And they're doing that with this Social Fabric show. It's like this new show that they're doing, and it's all about clothing trends all across the world. The last one I looked at was sneakers. It was all about like sneakerheads and the different styles and things like that. But it got me thinking about esports and trying to think about ways to do that for esports, right? Like trying to find a unique angle, because everyone talks about like the winning and the triumph and stuff like, but there's more stories there there's got to be more stuff there that we got to find. And I think that's the unique angle. Like who would have thought like you could create a TV show that's about jeans one week, sneakers another week, hats another week, belts another week. Yeah. It's like, who makes content like that and like goes across the world and like talks to all these people that like that's their thing. Like they're the belt person of the world. Like they've got 40 million belts of all different styles. Like who would create content on that? Like how would you ever think of that? Somebody.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about this, because it's funny, because like it's something that I've been actually figuring out, because again, like I'm kind of like trying to figure out, Lola is not going to be my money maker. That's not the thing that's going to be sustainable. That's not the thing that's going to let me quit my job. It's gonna be whatever my side thing is, right? And that would be create branded content and podcasts for them. And I've been like thinking like, how do I sell to these people? What is the painkiller that they need and all that kind of stuff? And one of the things I think has been more successful in like my pitches to people has been like, you want to create content and no one wants to watch commercials. No one wants to be sold anything anymore. But you can give someone a 30-minute commercial and they won't know it's a commercial because you're not really selling anything the whole time, but you're like basically brainwashing them, you know? When you're talking about all this Red Bull content, like, what do I think about Red Bull now? Without even watching this content, I'm like, Red Bull is fun, it's cool, they're extreme, right? Nothing about like, you have not talked to me. Like, if you wouldn't even have to tell me it's an energy drink. I'd be like, you'd tell me Red Bull is an energy drink. I'd be like, oh, that totally makes sense, you know? And, you know, another thing that I watch carefully at how they do things is Gimlet Media, because they basically do podcasts and they make branded podcasts. And I think they kind of, maybe, I'm not sure if they're the first, but I feel like they're the people that like started that, and
they're probably the biggest.
Yeah. And I've been like trying to like dissect how they do things. And I'm like, basically they find a company, for example, the Gatorade podcast. It was just kind of similar to what you were talking about with what we're trying to do, is like, you have this Gatorade podcast. It's about what happens to athletes when they through failure. Like, how do they become motivated through failure, right? So they talk about like, I can't remember if it's Eli or Peyton Manning, one of the Manning brothers, how like they were an amazing college quarterback and their first game was just absolutely horrible. It was horrible. Everyone was trash talking the whichever Manning brother it was, like, oh, he was total sham, he's not good, and then how that like fueled him to become better. And then now I'm thinking like, I've listened to like 6 episodes of all these failures and stuff like that. I'm like, Gatorade knows sports. Like, that's the understanding I have. Gatorade knows sports. Therefore, they probably make an amazing product for sports and athletic people. It's like, oh crap, I've just been brainwashed, you know? And they let me sit down for 8 hours or whatever, however many hours, to listen to them sell me their product without me realizing it, you know? And people enjoy, and they want that advertisement. That's the crazy part. People want to digest this content because you're making content that people enjoy.
That's something I've been thinking about a lot too, is like creating branded content and pitching it to non-endemics, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's non-endemic brands that want to get into esports, but they have no way because they don't see a return on investment from the teams, or like, I don't really have a very good example for this, but let's say Philips, right? Like the razor, like we were talking about, I was talking about with the guest that I had tonight, Jordan O'Hara, who I recorded with tonight. We were talking about Freiberg's commercial with Philips razor. It's hard for me to see, like, even though Optic has a huge reach and Freiberg has a huge reach, it's hard for me to see them getting a return on what they're probably, you know, paying for, I want to say. You know, like Optic, let's say, has, you know, let's say their reach is 10 million, right? I'm curious to know how much they pay for Freiberg to do that spot and have Optic, like, create that commercial and that content for them and get it out there. Maybe it's, you know, $50K, you know, maybe it's $50,000 or 80 grand or 100 grand, whatever it is. Are they going to get that return based on young people like you and I buying those razors? Like, is that money spent on brand awareness worth it to them?
Sure. Versus
creating like a TV show where you're providing something of value, not just a funny commercial, right? Like you're like the Red Bull TV, like that sneaker episode was super interesting, right?
Yeah, I have to watch
So if you can create like a 20-25 minute TV show essentially, and it's like funny or entertaining or insightful or utilitarian or whatever it is, that to me, I think is more ROI positive than like a 20-second funny, I'm shaving my face with a razor kind of ad spot like we would typically see like a professional athlete do.
Yep. I mean, what Geico is a sponsor for TSM. Geico should just make a documentary about the world's group stage and competition that's coming up this month. Like,
Yeah.
they should follow them around and make. Like, TSM already has a documentary series that they make, but they should follow them around, make content about esports, and put together a 6-part series. They don't even have to like know esports that well. They just need like a few consultants, talk to like a few people, have a few people watch what they're making during the time, like find like Travis to look at it and pay him like $5,000 for some like consulting, and then bam, they have a viral YouTube series for 6 episodes or something. Like, that's how they should be making content.
Yeah, I think you and I can probably both agree, like the day and age of like the traditional 30-second advertisement is going away, and it's going to be these branded pieces of content. Like maybe it's still short form, or maybe it's like 10 minutes, maybe it's 30, maybe it's still 30 seconds, but maybe it's less of, cheesy like Freiberg shaving his face and more like him playing like 2 minutes of a Counter-Strike match, and like the little logo is down on the bottom, and it's like, this is sponsored by Philips, and it has nothing to do with the razor company, but it's him, playing Counter-Strike, and that's their piece or something like that. I think there's going to be more of that.
I mean, actually, like, when you're talking about this, just reminds me, like, Camel cigarettes, right? You have, like, was it Camel that had, like, Clint Eastwood smoking them or something? Like, Cowboy smoking them, and then, like, everyone's like, cigarettes are cool. Like, that's what people have been doing. Like, or, like, you need this to be sexy, or you need this to be beautiful, or you need this to be strong. Like, this is not a new concept, but it just needs to be associated to esports and gaming and, like repurposed.
Yeah. I think one thing that interests me is if we come up with something that's a unique idea as far as like content goes. I think we could very easily, if we come up with a really good idea, I think we could easily pitch it to these brands, be like, hey, we're going to produce this content. Like, we're going to do it all. Like, it's free. Well, not free. Let's say we're going to create it all, right? We're going to do all the producing, the edit, like we do it all soup to nuts. You just, slap your name on it, and, it'll be your branded content. It's going to cost this much.
Yeah.
And you help us, we're smaller, so you have to help us with you have the audience, right? It's, we piggyback on your distribution. We produce all the content. It's branded for you. And, if it's specific to a team or a player, like maybe there's an agreement there to like share revenue or something like that. But I think that has a chance to make an impact, because I think it's in a format where people will naturally consume it.
Yeah. Okay. We kind of went on a weird tangent.
Yeah, I know.
I know. Like, oh, this is so good. All right. Oh, that was really fun. But let's get back on. Okay, so yeah, I have to get off soon. But okay, so we thought of the idea, like looking at the failures and the stories behind that. Maybe even the thing I don't like about that, which I think it's a good idea, it's like I always just like happy endings. That's a problem with me.
Yeah.
But then it would be really cool if you find a failure, like again, thinking about the Gatorade podcast, if you find a failure story that had redemption in it, for example.
Sure. Yeah.
That was a big theme of the mid-seasonal invitation, which is like the half year, like 6 months before Worlds, between splits for League of Legends, they have the international tournament, and like G2, like really, really good team in Europe, first place, and they always flop at international tournaments, and there's memes about it. And like this year, they redeemed themselves by getting second place and only losing to the number 1 Korean team in the world. So that was like huge redemption. Like having that kind of story would be really cool if that exists. It might not exist. Either way, I think we pick a story and just go with it. And like we said before, we could plan as much as we want, and
Sure.
we'll never get stuff done. So no, I think, yeah. And I think what we need to pick is whether it's failure or success. I don't think it matters. We just pick something, and I think we picked something that, like, the first 2 episodes should be something that I'm familiar with and something that you're familiar with. So it'll be easy. It'll be like an easy way to get into it with the least amount of barriers because at least we know, right?
Yeah.
And then after that,
And
we start getting a little fancy or experimental.
It doesn't even need to be, yeah, like it doesn't even need to be success or failure either. Like it could be, I keep going back to that Red Bull content. Like they created a series called Social Fabric, and it was about the styles and clothing and, trends all over the world, from sneakers to hats to jeans, you name it. So if we could find like a unique something like that, I think something that's unique is the equipment that people use. Maybe it's like, and this would also attract brands, right? Because if you're talking about a Razer mouse and a Saytech keyboard, naturally, they might want to piggyback on top of that discussion. But one thing that might be interesting is, like, I know for Counter-Strike, people are really particular about their mice. Like they're very particular about their mice and their keyboard and how it's all set up. Like maybe there's potential there to create a story about, the actual equipment of the people. And it's like kind of like the Gatorade example. It's like Gatorade probably wants to be synonymous with, professional athletes and hydration and,
crazy high performance,
preparation.
like that.
Yeah, high performance training, endurance, stuff like that. Whereas like Razer would want to be known for the same kind of things, like high performance, like professional gamers, endurance, like longevity, good product, like those kind of things.
How would you feel about if we took a storytelling approach to like a play when it comes to like how the play like developed and actually happened, even like talking about the mechanics of the game that they took advantage of, or like, because for example, again, I wish I could make a more relatable example for you, but with League of Legends, like the insect play is everyone calls things the insect now when you knock someone into your team, because what happened was someone found a way with a champion where you shoot a kick at them or like a beam and it hits them, and then you activate the ability again, and then you fly towards them, right? And then another thing you can do is, as you're flying towards them, you can place a ward behind them and jump to that as well, and then you can kick that person back to your team. And that was done by the first time it was done on professional play was by a Korean player named Insect. So everyone's like, whoa, what just happened? Like, you can do that? And like things got even crazier where people were able to buffer spells before, like, while the animation was going, you can actually flash. So you'd kick them. Actually, it looks like you're kicking them away, but the kick animation starts, and you have like a tenth of a second to actually flash behind them. So it's even less time for them to react to the animation. And people are like,
right.
Whoa, you can do that? So if you actually like broke down the play, like, this is what happened, like, this is the champion, like, this is what they can do, this was a pivotal moment, no one expected it, and suddenly this happened. How did that happen? We break it down. And I'm sure, like, especially with like any fighting game, you could really break down the nitty-gritty. With Counter-Strike, I'm sure there's plenty of things where like we decided to go this way when they usually go this way, and they actually use this like glitch in the game or this like advantage of this specific spot that no one realized existed. Like, I'm sure there's these kind of stories that you can really dive deep into a play of the game that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think
people haven't gone that deep.
Yeah, I think it could be interesting. Like, I don't know fighting games really that well.
Sure, neither do I.
But like Counter-Strike or maybe some other FPSs, stuff like that would be more in my wheelhouse to kind of dissect. And I think, not thinking through it, one thing I just thought of when you were saying that is like a highlight, like you said, a highlight moment or like a turning point of a match. Like you take that one play or that one round or something like that, and you kind of dissect that, like you said. I think could be pretty interesting.
And to be honest, like when I think about it, we just said like we're not that familiar with fighting games, if you find one play, which is just like, you know, a 10-hit combo that turned around a match, we don't have to know like every matchup in the game or like specific interact. We just need to know like these two champions, like the stories behind them, the combo that used. Like we don't need to know everything. We can do enough research to figure out what happened exactly there. We can talk to people about it, and we can talk
that
about
could
something
be
confidently. Yeah,
that could be even an interesting perspective, like somebody who knows nothing about like fighting games talking about like this epic moment in fighting games. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? Like maybe that's
yeah. And I actually that's what we talked about with the reply all show, where it's a yes, yes, no, where you know people bring in this tweet that's about like Pepe the Frog, and no one knows who Pepe the Frog. Their boss doesn't know who Pepe the Frog is, and they're like, "Do you understand this tweet?" No, and they explain it to him. Like I could totally see like, "Hey, do you know what a Mad Life is in League of Legends?" You'd be like, "No, I have no idea." And you see the play, you're like, "Okay, I like things happened, I don't get it," and then I could break it down. You're like, "Oh, that's really cool." So I think it's something that a very casual person that just loves the hypeness behind esports can really get into it, because we present it to each other, or even like special guests we can bring on too, which I think would be really useful, and really dissect it into a nice crafted story that's very casual, but crafted and can be very entertaining without ostracizing people either.
Yeah, I think that could be really interesting. And then you throw like a guest in who's got like a particular expertise in that game, like could be really interesting, or interesting perspective. I definitely think that could be pretty unique to what else is going on for sure.
You've been making the connections too, so that's gonna be useful too. I could totally.
I know.
Like a fighting games guy, and just like talk about it.
I'm sure that James Chen would come on and do something. I'm sure that like could get Smug on, talk about Smash and stuff like that. So yeah, I think there'll definitely be opportunities to do that. I think that could probably work.
Yeah. Oh, this is I'm really, really excited about this. Another thing that I like, it's funny. We talked about this like I think 2 weeks ago. I'm like, I realized I need to like step back and stop doing more stuff and like concentrate and focus, and then I keep putting more stuff on my plate.
Well, it's got to be strategic, right? Like
yes.
it's got to be from a strategic standpoint. You know, we'll have to talk more about like the goals are and ambitions of what we want or what we intend from this, and we have to decide if it's going to be something that's like free content, you know, or if it's something that we want to do like a freemium model or Patreon kind of thing, or if we want to go to like try and pitch sponsors for it, and that like go to actual like non-endemics and talk about doing it for them, that kind of thing. Like I think there's a lot of stuff to iron out, obviously, still with that, but yeah, for sure. But like now that I'm going to be going down to one episode, I'll definitely have more time to produce more stuff like that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I like
it depends, right? You know, like it. Yeah, I think it could really work because I think there's not a lot of people doing like, especially that reply all style.
Yes.
That you talked about, like that explainer kind of thing, like because I think. I want to say that it's BuzzFeed does some stuff like this too. Like they'll take a particular topic, or they'll have like grandparents, like these I don't know if you saw this, but like they had grandparents smoke weed or something like that for the first time.
Yeah, I've seen those kind of videos. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
It's like you could do something like that for League of Legends, like somebody who's like I'm an avid video gamer, not so much anymore as often as I like, just because I'm doing the podcast and stuff like that. But play video games all my life. Like I understand video games. Like it's easy for me to understand.
Yeah.
You take someone who's understands that, and then you throw them into like Dota or League of Legends or something, and they're like, "What the hell is going on?" Like, what mid lane? What? I was like, "What is going on?"
And all the particles, you're like, I don't know what just happened in the last 3 seconds, and why is everyone yelling? I don't get it.
Do you follow World of Warcraft at all? Like
I
WoW?
do not. I do not. I
See,
avoided WoW like the plague because I'm like, I am gonna get sucked into this, and I've seen it take people's lives. So I'm like, I have to stay away from it.
I follow WoW, so like I'm not as good as like the casters are at explaining things and stuff like that, but I follow WoW. I'm very familiar with the game and the mechanics and everything, so I could explain some scenarios or situations and stuff like that potentially. And that could be interesting because WoW Arena is the same kind of thing like League. It's like a cluster. Like
Okay.
there's a lot of animations going on, there's a lot happening, and it's really fast paced, and it's hard to like really understand what's going on. That's why it's such a difficult spectator sport
I see.
or esport. So yeah, I think it could work. I think there's some things to figure out, but yeah, I think that kind of format would be interesting. I'd be interested. It's the type of content that I would watch, right? Like that's the stuff
Yeah.
I like creating, is like stuff that we would like watching. Or
Yeah. Actually, I just like started to realize like, Riot does make something like they do a team fight breakdown where they take a team fight and they say why it's important, what the key things there. They have like kind of a topic of like what it is, and they break it down like spell by spell. But I want to even go even potentially even more micro into it and more storytelling too.
yeah, everyone does it, right? Like ESPN does it, CBS does it, NBC does it, Golf Channel does it. They all have their own unique perspective on it. So I think the opportunity is there. It's just a matter of producing it and breaking through the noise, so to speak, like creating something that is kind of got its own unique, like while it's the same, it has its own unique angle to it.
Absolutely, I absolutely agree.
For sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna try to put together like, I'm gonna figure out what league play out I want to talk about and show you. I think I'll put that together this week or maybe this weekend or something, and at least start doing a little more in-depth research on it. Maybe that'll be an action item.
Yeah, and I think I'll brainstorm some ideas too, and like what game or what moment or like what match and stuff like that, and we can kind of come together and put some footage together and try and like let's produce a couple things and see how we like it, and
Yeah. Cool.
yeah, let's
All
do it.
right. I think that wraps it up for this episode of the Podcasters Chat Room. I really like that name. I think
It's catchy.
I think we can actually. One thing I would love to do is actually bring on other people onto this and really like have conversations and pick their brains too about the podcasting stuff that they're doing, or maybe
Yeah, that would be sweet.
podcasting. I think that could be really fun. And again, like I think the cool thing about this is that it's really a conversation rather than like.
You should have really got Chase Jarvis on this call so we could talk to him about
that would've been
painkillers
great.
versus vitamins.
Yeah. Next time, I'll just call him up. Knock on his door.
Maybe Gary Vee would make a cameo too.
Yeah. Stop by for a few seconds. All right, so that's it for this episode. See you guys.
Take it easy.
All right.